It's your guy, the people's champion, Amp Brown.
D.L. Cummings here.
This is Ronald Tracy Robinson.
I am an advocate for Black nationalism in the community.
I am the chair of the Libertarian Party here in Duval County.
This is a collaborative effort between the Black nationalists and the Libertarian Party to see how we can connect a bridge to do proper outreach to the African American community, specifically in Jacksonville, Florida.
We're going to be talking about the AP curriculum that Ron DeSantis is banning in the state of Florida. And there's been a lot of traction in this news pertaining to the African American community and how they feel about it. A lot of them feel like, oh wow, this is just another racist ploy against Ron DeSantis. He's erasing African American history. He's erasing the critical race theory that deals with a lot of topics concerning slavery and the institution of white supremacy. Now, the question that I want to pose is, why are we as African American people going around making protests, going to Tallahassee and making a big stink about what the governor does in our public school institutions, where they're not obligated to teach anything concerning African American history in the first place, or at least in the right scope that they're looking for? Because where I'm coming from is, if you want good education, it's got to come from home, number one. When it comes to government institutions, you're not going to have that cohesive voice or a cohesive vision that you're looking for when it comes to education, about educating your child. So, and the subjects contained within, like I said, is critical race theory and also queer theory when it comes to AP subject concerning African American studies. Now, with all these things in the fold, what do you gentlemen believe is the appropriate course of action? Should we continue to protest these things as far as what the government is doing in our public schools, or should we prioritize our own institutions and privatize education moving forward?
Before we answer that, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Thanks. I'm the token, so I got to ask, guys. When you say, should we continue to protest, the question I have is the we actually protesting? Because when I'm on Twitter, I see a lot of people complaining about it, and they're all white. So I'm like, how much outrage is there in the black community?
A lot.
It's plenty.
There's a lot.
Okay.
It's
okay.
plenty.
Because the video and the stuff that I like, and maybe it's just, the feed that I have, I don't really know. Mm-hmm. But like the other day, I saw something. It was like, it was from local Duval, and it was like, Save Our Duval Schools or something. I don't know, some account, and they had 4 people. 4 videos of people. 3 of them were white women, and then the other one was a black gentleman. And I think he actually, I think the other 3, the 3 women were, I think they were like activists. And then the black man, I think he was somebody on like some sort of school board or something like that. Like I think he had an official position. Mm-hmm. But then other things that I've seen, it just seems to be a lot of white women complaining. And I'm like, that seems kind of weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's my response. First of all, I see a lot of black folks that are complaining. It's DeSantis centered, a lot of it. But to answer your earlier question, man, I've always felt like as a black community, as somebody, man, who is very serious, very intentional, man, about safeguarding our history, it should start in our communities. When you think about the history of black folks who were enslaved after 1865 to 1900, we were very intentional about cutting that literacy rate in half. I think we're in the Guinness Book of World Records for a demographic of group of people, man, in a short period of time who said, you know what, I want to be able to read and write, and I want to be able to do some things, man, from a literacy standpoint. What is stopping us today in 2023 where we can't take some of these blighted churches, some of these homes, some of all of this education that black folks are always bragging and talking about, and why can't we just at our level here in Jacksonville, Florida, create a one-stop shop in which not only do we teach our history, but we also bring back some of the trade schools, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to address the elephant in the room. I think one of the reasons why you see all that protesting is because there is a faction of our community that is very lazy. They want the state, the same state, man, that exploits them and treats them less than human, to educate them. But when it's convenient, we want to protest against it. It always starts at home. Now, I understand that, we don't necessarily have both parents in from a data standpoint, but we're not serious about our education. And the only time we get serious about our education is when you have issues like this with the Santos. Me personally, nobody's not stopping anybody from taking 2 or 3 days out of the week to teach their children about education, to teach their children specifically about Black history, to contextualize that and use that for how we can move forward politically today. Nobody's not stopping you from doing that. The public school system was not designed to teach Black girls and Black boys how to be proud about themselves in a vacuum. And now all of a sudden they're attacking it. You don't learn a lot anyway from a Black history standpoint. The majority of stuff I learned is in my library at home. I learned it from my parents. I learned it from going to school. I learned it from interacting with other folks. So if we're going to use that energy to go down there protesting, I'll be the first one to tell you need to protest reparations as a whole. You don't need to be going down there talking about what's going on in the school system because you don't control it anyway. The curriculum is garbage to begin with. And if you really are triggered about what's going on in these curriculums, come up with your own curriculum, use some of that education that you got that you're always hollering about, and let's find out if you're serious about it. Quick side note, there were a couple of classes that were offered. There were African-American history classes probably about 1.5 years ago. They offered African-American history course at Rames that was free, and they offered one at Mandarin High School that was free. Because of the lack of participation, I signed up. My mother signed up. They had to cut those courses, night courses. Let me be specific for those who don't know. It was not in the regular school curriculum in high school or anything like that. But these are night courses that the public had an opportunity to go to learn about some African-American history. I think they were offered on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And because the interest was so low, they had to cut the course. So if we're going to yell and scream and act a fool about what DeSantis is doing, man, on the public schools and schools in general as it pertains to African-American history, then it's not reflective in the interests at home and in the communities. And when there's an opportunity, man, to get this history, I don't see the turnout, nor do I see the concern for it. I know a lot of Black folks would say, why is he on that platform talking about what we don't do? He shouldn't do that the whole nine. Well, the cat is out the bag. There's a lot of different platforms and podcasts where Black folks talk about you need to take more responsibility and accountability for what you're doing. I'm telling you, Anthony Javon Brown Sr., that you're not serious about your history to begin with. If you were serious about your history to begin with, I can kind of understand this. But you need to get serious about that. You need to get serious about a lot of different things. And so I can't take you seriously. So I know it's hard for anybody else to take the Black community seriously if you're not already doing some of the things on your own to show that you are interested in Black history. And one of the things that we can do right now is we can challenge and we can see exactly how serious they are about keeping the history away from us as a whole. If we go in some of these churches, and I use church all the time, I want to be specific. I use church all the time because church is one of the few places that Black folks still have a lot of influence in, and they have a lot of ownership in terms of those doors being open. You have an opportunity to use that outside of trying to hustle folks all through the week. You need to be trying to teach some stuff, and you need to be trying to use the church, man, for everything other than hustling the community and trying to get money from them and not putting that money back in the community. That's another topic for another day. But if we're going to be serious, we have an opportunity to educate our own children, and we have the institutions already in place. Take your money and enhance something that you already have and be more serious and intentional about your history. I don't want to hear nothing about no protesting when you can take the books. Hell, you can use some of my books. Give back. But you can use some of my books, man, and you can go in there and teach some folks, man. So I'm very passionate about that.
So now, why do you think there's such a low interest and turnout as it comes to their own history if they want to complain about it so much? Because we got the Durkeeville Museum
That's right.
Right over there. And shout out to those guys, man, because they give such a wealth of knowledge and information in that little building. I mean, it's just
shout out to Mr.
stuffed.
Lloyd. You can check Tony's Tangent. We did an interview with him, the whole 9, quick plug, but it does have a wealth of knowledge in it.
Definitely. And I went in there and it definitely changed the way I perceive the city of Jacksonville as a whole from where it was and what it ended up becoming, especially with the Sugar Hill area and how that's been completely ramshacked by putting the interstate right through that neighborhood and disenfranchising the affluent African-American communities that were there, and how it redlined that community, a practice that is still happening to this day that is racially motivated, that the people that's in office right now are still perpetrating, which goes back, well, not goes back to anything we said before, but I remember we had a conversation one time about how when people say that black people can't be racist, and then I told you that I disagree with that because by the definition, we say black people and racism, that means we have to have some sort of institutional power to affect other people's lives.
That's right.
Now, when the people who are African-American that are in office today that are using these racially motivated policies and still perpetrating them, I can say they're very much, they're being very racist right now because we have such political capital. I believe more than we ever had in this country. And today, we're still using that political capital to keep the suppression of African-American communities and creating a cap over their growth and development. Now, that, like I said, that could be a topic for another day that we can speak on. But you brought up a good point about you having your own books and you having your own library and saying, give them back. You can rent them out.
Right.
But it goes back into privatizing libraries and privatizing institutions where we get our books from, because we all know the stuff that they have in these libraries are pretty debaucherous. And you pretty much know where I'm going with this. Another cat that's out the bag about perverse sexual and pornographic images that are being put in these public school libraries that's open and available for our kids to read. One of them being the gay BCs, another one being it's completely normal.
You're gonna make them mad now.
Listen, man, look.
You're gonna make the left mad.
Unless we're gonna have a conversation about it, we gotta talk about what's actually in there, because they want to act like it's not there, but they still want to have their privileges as well.
Let me say this. I am not a fan of Santos. I'm not a fan of the red or the blue crew. I am a fan of letting a child who is going through the developmental stages in their life be a child. If that child, once they turn 18, whether it is a female or a male, decide that they want to be a part of an alternative lifestyle, they need to learn that outside of a mainstream school curriculum.
Now who's gonna make people mad?
That is an absolute no-go as far as I'm concerned.
Right. I agree with
And
you,
what bothers me is you got black folks, man, who are supporting this debauchery, these alternative lifestyles, to say the least,
and pushing it on these children.
I want to be clear. That should not be in a school. And if it was in a school that my kids were attending, I would have a problem with the superintendent. I would have a problem with the principal, and I most certainly would have a problem with anybody, man, that supports that. So that's an absolute no-go. One more thing quickly. There is no such thing as a black racist in this country. And even though black folks who are pushing these anti-black policies, the mandate is coming from somebody above them. They do not have the power to keep people from employment. They do not have the power, man, to keep folks from moving in certain areas. They do not have the power, man, to do anything. The only thing they are supervisors who carry out the mandates of somebody, and somebody who's trying to use that rhetoric in order to further their career and do whatever they need to do. But we are in agreement that these alternative, and I'm gonna call it that, these alternative lifestyles and these classes and all these other things that you're doing, black folks, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, because we come from a group of folks who have gone through a lot in this country. And although I don't believe a black person to be conservative either, I do believe we have conservative values. What happened to that? So you got to look yourself in the mirror. I ain't a fan of that. Where is the intestinal fortitude? Where is the self-reliance and picking yourself up, man, and using the resources you have to create an environment that's going to be healthy for these children?
Yeah, because that's my biggest problem with the African-American community today. We all act like it's not a problem, like it's not affecting our children directly. Well, it definitely is. And when it comes to education, that's one of those things that they're completely neglecting, like with this AP curriculum that the DeSantis is supposed to be banning, that contains critical race theory, that says, I see a lot of people who are against what DeSantis is doing and banning that curriculum because they say our history should be told. Now, the problem with that is it also contains queer theory. And it goes back to what you just said about shoving an alternative lifestyle to these children. Now, the thing is, the question I want to pose to you real quick before I go into privatized institutions as far as libraries are concerned, do you think they just pretty much ignored that and just kind of say, oh, well, you know, we ain't got to worry about that right now? Or they're so focused on putting out red herrings as far as teaching our history, racism, white supremacy, blah, 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 that they completely neglected that little part, and they just say, let's just go ahead and keep moving forward. There's nothing to see here. We're walking, pretty much like that. Well, how do you feel about that?
As it relates to who? The black community?
As it relates to the black community when they're doing all this protesting, because they do all this protesting, telling people they want to pull their heartstrings and keep claiming racism, keep claiming white supremacy, but they're not telling them about what's inherently within these curriculums that DeSantis is banning in the state of Florida. But they just say, don't worry about the queer theory part. Worry about the critical race theory part.
I think they're complicit. I think when you look at a lot of these protesters, you got queer, you got gay folks, you got trans folks that are involved, and they try to blur the lines between the black community and, you know, this gay and lesbian community. So I think, I don't necessarily know if they knew completely. I think a lot of people were just ignorant about what was banned and what was allowed.
Like they just heard racism and they just kind of went with the train.
Right. But even in that, I think again, and I have to be critical of the left and the Democrats, they are pro all of this. Didn't we just see the president allow for a transgender person, man, to pull their top up or something like that? Didn't we?
Well, they didn't get, they weren't allowed, but they
wasn't that the attempt?
This was like a couple months ago. There was the transgender person who went to the White House. They had pride flags that were draped, and the conservatives got very, very angry over it because the pride flags, they basically were up high. Pretty much, I mean, they weren't overtaking the U.S.
You said
flag,
pride flags.
Pride flags.
Clarify.
Right.
But
I thought he said something else.
Yeah, I know. Right? I see your face.
Where Eminem at? You know they got Eminem.
You have to excuse them. They're Gen Xers. You got to forgive them. All right.
What are you talking about, Mama?
But yeah. So they had these pride flags that were basically as prominent as the U.S. flag. That's what really triggered the conservatives, right? Is the prominence, right? And then at that same event, there was some sort of, like, I think they were like a YouTuber or, you know, whoever, you know, some sort of influencer and a trans person, and they lifted their top and was shaking their breasts.
It was like an assembly line of them people.
Yeah.
They just,
and
like,
you know,
Girls Gone Wild, 2008.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You know, what's funny about that, like, and I'll bring this back to education and everything in a second, but it's funny about that because I had done a podcast, on my own Liberty Dad podcast, where I brought a guy on who said, he was like, look, there is a trans genocide. And I was like, dude, there's no trans genocide. And he was like, no, there is. And so we kind of had this like conversation about it. And one of the things that came up was this event. Right. And I asked him, I said, do you think activists on your side, and when I said your side, I just meant like he was more pro-trans, I was a little bit less. Okay. And I said, do you think activists on your side are acting like fools and need to be reined in? And he was like, no. And I was like, really? And then I said, well, what about this event here? And he laughed. And I said, and I didn't think about it at the time, but later I was like, he should have been more upset at his activists representing his side, being a fool, making a mockery, than I was. Right? And I think that kind of goes into what you were saying earlier, like the black community should be more angry about certain things that maybe, you know, the white women that I see all the time that seem to be super duper angry about this
on behalf of everybody else.
Right. You know, and maybe that anger gets channeled into education on our own, meaning, you know, the black community.
But they're with the white women, and I'm just making an assumption. They don't have the same agenda, in my opinion, as the black community.
No,
I think you have a lot of folks who have kind of slid between the cracks, man, and they have their own agenda, and maybe they're being manipulative, and maybe they are using different talking points in order for them, man, to kind of blur the lines. I want to be clear. When I'm talking about black history, I'm not talking about gay history. I'm not talking about the LGBT 123 crew. I'm talking about folks, man, who primarily descended from the enslaved and made something of themselves all the way into the present day. There's nothing gay related about it. In fact, some of this lifestyle that we're talking about was pushed on African Americans, the men, women, and children. There was rape during the transatlantic slave trade. There were gay folks, man, who were in that community and were anti-black, as there are today. So I want to be very clear. There is a distinct difference between what the gay and lesbian community is fighting for and what we're talking about in terms of real black history. So I just wanted to do that. And some of these women, I don't know if they're the same. The moms of Liberty, I think they're like Daughters of Confederacy 2.0.
I mean,
So,
maybe you got Moms for
really?
Liberty and you got
Really?
Moms Demand.
So
I think you're reaching. I don't know. I think you're reaching on that one.
I'm not. I mean, racism reinvents itself and retools itself all the time. And although it can't be overtly like that sometimes, you got to be careful. And you got to figure out, man, what is the end game for some of these organizations, some of these folks that we see out here in the streets. Listen, if you're starting to put something out, man, that's anti-me, I put you in the same category with these other folks. I don't have no problem doing it. And
But really
gotta
saying
So here's a hypothesis. I think that there's a lot of people out there that are jockeying for power. Like that's, I think that ultimately that's ends up what it's been.
and they're using some of these topics in order to push
I
an
think
agenda.
so, and I think that when they jockey for power, there are those who, and I'm not going to try to sit here and decide who's who, but I think there are those who are, they are out seeking power, and then there are those who are like, okay, well, if they get power, that means that's a negative for me, so I need to go and seek power as well, so that they don't have it. And I think you have a lot of different interests going on all over the place, right? And honestly, once you leave the black community, I would be willing to argue that most everybody has no interest in improving the black community.
I agree.
Even if what they're arguing for sounds like it would improve the black community, I think very few of them are arguing to improve the black community. But what they want to do is they want power for some reason, whether it's to keep somebody else from getting it or just because they're power hungry themselves.
This is my thing, though. What does that mean? And we talk about this a lot of times when we're talking about the interests of the black community. And when you put out something that's anti-me, I got a problem with it. But what does anti-black mean? What does that stand for? Because like how we said before, the black community is a whole spectrum of people and ideologies.
So-called supposedly not a monolith. I hear that all the time.
Yeah, it definitely isn't, because come to find out, we're individuals. Black people have many different ways of thinking and going about stuff. Like how we're talking right now, how we're blaming
Like the two examples right here.
Like two examples right here in front of you. We're both two completely different individuals, So when you say, because like for me, I stand for, on average, complete almost 180 to what the average African American would stand for. And if I would bring,
Give me an example.
Matter of fact, I was going to give you an example. As a matter of fact, when someone told me that I was having a conversation with an African American woman not too long ago. I think I told y'all about her before, and you. We were talking about. No, I didn't mean nothing by it. I didn't mean nothing by it. I was just saying. I
told y'all about it, and you. All right, man. Damn.
That was a little aggressive. That was aggressive. Excuse me.
This token roll is tough.
You serious about that thing, boy? And you.
I shouldn't have said nothing at all. But no, we were talking about a myriad of subjects as far as the government's role in the African American community. How the government, she was saying the government needs to make a much more pervasive role in their institutions, their education, and all this stuff. And I keep telling her the opposite about why it's a detriment to the African American community. Like for example, let's say, there's so much. Like let's just stick on the schooling topic. We're just talking about school and we're talking about education. And I was saying that in Baltimore, they did a survey about schools, right, in each age group, from elementary school, middle school, and high school. Come to find out, none of the students out of the thousands that they've surveyed perform at their grade level in the subject that they've been surveyed on. And this is a product of the public school system that you see worldwide. Well, I'll say countrywide, rather. And so I would post to her all the time, how can we guarantee a monopolized service industry to give market positive results on something they don't have to be obligated to perform. If they're already front loaded the money, in spite of whether they get results or not, what's the point of it all, right? Just like how we're speaking about right now. And she was like, "Oh, no, my God, no," things like that. Like for example, I'm going to a couple years ago, Diane Green, the superintendent of Duval County Public Schools,
Who had to step down?
Yeah, who had to step down recently, and she got a hefty raise of about over $100,000, and she was getting paid twice as much as the previous mayor, Mayor Curry, at that time. And
He didn't deserve it.
Yeah, she didn't deserve none of that stuff. She didn't deserve having my
He didn't
tax
deserve it either.
dollars. No. They don't deserve none of the stuff because we see
You're
that.
talking to libertarians. When
Yeah,
you talk about,
now you sound like a libertarian. It's like, what are they doing with my money?
talk about politicians don't deserve it. Libertarians are all on board. We're like, nope, they don't.
No, they do
you
not.
know who they are? Nope, but they still don't deserve it.
And there was just an article recently came out in News4Jax talking about how the test scores and the grades, they were underperforming outside of expectations. In spite of them giving up so much money to these people, raising up our property tax millage rate in order to pay for public school teachers, because they claimed that they weren't getting enough money. They claimed they weren't making enough money at that time. But they make more money, exponentially more money than on average than private school teachers and homeschool teachers and things of that nature. For example, my sister, she's a single mother. She has to educate 3 of her children. And not only she has to work, put a roof over their head, food on the table, clothes on their back, but she gets homeschool curriculums from another county, in Clay County. But yet she still pays property taxes to Duval County Public Schools. She's paying tuition for children she don't even have, for children that's not even going to Duval County Public Schools. She's paying double, and it doesn't make any sense because a lot of people who are disenfranchised in the community that are being disenfranchised because of public taxation that's keeping them at a certain threshold that they cannot get out of. Then they say, well, private school is really expensive. We can't afford it. Well, we can't afford it because they keep waxing us on our taxation. So imagine your labor, you're not getting 100% of your labor because it's going somewhere else where you're not getting a direct benefit from it. That's my issue with the public school system as a whole. And also with Diane Green getting over $100,000 in a raise from our money, you have crazy things going on and like investigations going on at Douglas Anderson, where they committed, there's like 5 teachers that they found over there conducting misconduct with students that are there. All of a sudden, you end up finding out for the past 17 years, going back for a very long time, they were underreporting to the JSO department the crimes that were happening on these schools as it relates to these students.
And there's so many Home Depots with wood chippers just waiting.
Really, though? Really?
Throwing that out there.
You know what I mean?
But, I think a good test for the parties, like, hey, do you have the black community, their interest really in mind? I think a good question would be to say, would you be cool if they stopped paying school taxes and just decided to do their own thing, homeschool, some sort of collective, whatever,
actively participate
and
in the market?
Which parties do you think would be like, that's probably a good idea? Mm-hmm. None. Well, actually, the Libertarian Party would.
Yeah, Republican, Democrats. There's a lot of interest with lobbying groups.
They'd have all kind of reasons why you couldn't do it.
Exactly.
I have to say this though. The purpose for the school. The purpose for the school is to educate that group of people so they can be competitive with other folks who they're competing with. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about a school curriculum and a school framework, it's not just the fact that I think black folks need to have their own school, but they need to have a specific kind of school that speaks for the needs in the community. There are kids that when they get to school, they finally get something to eat. So you have to address that. You have to address that you have kids walking around here who are reading on a 4th grade level and they're in high school. You have to address that. You cannot have a normal school curriculum. And you have a lot of kids around here who do not have any black pride, who do not know where they're coming from, and they can't put historical issues in context to use them for precedent to put it in a political today context. And I think a lot of times that's what people don't understand about history. It's not just about knowing facts and dates. It's about we have precedent. We're going to use that precedent for what's going on today and for what's in our best interest based on what experiences we went through in the past. I am a fan of educating our own. I think nobody else cares about black folks like black folks do. And so if black folks are very nonchalant and very disconnected with their own education, I can't expect anybody else, man, to be excited about educating folks, man, who, when given the opportunity, don't jump at the opportunity to learn more about their own selves.
Question. And I want to bring it back into the privatized institutions as far as libraries are concerned. Do you believe that African Americans should privatizing those institutions?
No, I don't believe in privatizing anything like that. That should be open to the public.
Then what were we talking about this whole time?
As far as what?
Because what we're talking about was the reason why public education doesn't work, but yet you don't believe in privatizing anything. So how can we create the results that we want to see if we don't privatize the institutions? Because once we privatize it, then it'll be it'll be for profit, which means then we can gauge the market incentive of who wants what. Just like with the program we're talking about with Reigns back then, the night program, there was such a small interest that they ended up having to shut down because there was really no indicators in the market of where there was interest in it in the first place. Now, if we would have privatized bookstores or privatized institutions or privatized libraries, we can gauge with the people in the surrounding area. All right, we're going to put this right here. Go ahead and come to this library where you're not going to get.
Are you talking about privatization in a general sense, or are you talking about black folks owning those institutions in their own community?
Yeah, absolutely. Where they own it, where they own this library or own this bookstore.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they go and they come in there, you know what I'm saying? Go and rent this book, give it back. But give it back, and shoot, don't bring it back. We'll just charge you the late fees and put it back into the institution, whatever.
Right.
But it's going to be for those that want exactly what they want for their children, and not something that they got to protest against in the state or whatever. Because now they're not going to think about what's happening in the state. They don't care about what the government does with the education or what they do in the public libraries, because they're going to their own institution where they have their own books and their own things where they can look at.
I have no problem with that in theory,
'Cause I
particularly
think-
if it's something specifically for the black community.
Absolutely.
I don't have a problem with that in theory. I think that's something that we need to have that conversation about, because what's currently being done right now is not getting it done.
No, it's not. And and just like we were talking about, we were talking to the other people before we came and did the show. We were talking about
Bernstein Bears. What other people you talking about? Oh,
the ones then.
You're not talking about them, are you? Because they definitely.
You thought they was Bernsteins?
No, they're not Bernsteins.
Okay. And it was this gentleman, Dr. John Repo. Shout out to him of Jack's Health and Wellness, the medicine with the heart. That's a tagline on 9957 Moorings Drive, Suite 403. Check him out. But
who is that?
Wait.
that was a gentleman we just met earlier today.
Oh, y'all. Okay.
Yeah. We were talking to him. Yeah, he was a
He
health.
gave a shout out before the sponsorship.
Yeah,
We got to work on this man.
we got to work on him. He said, "Hey, man, you know what? We can help
No, I
out."
mean you.
Can't put
We got to work on you. You over here like.
ain't paid no bills, nothing for me to give free shout out like that too.
I was like, hey,
Shout out to Jesus, man. He cutting us a good deal though.
yeah, he's
But
he's
anybody
really doing
want
his
to put
thing.
some money on it too, we definitely welcome that.
Absolutely. Now, what was talking about? Yeah, we were talking to them about the. He doesn't have any.
We done derailed him.
Yeah. Y'all done derailed me bad, man.
Privatize.
Yeah. But about prioritizing private institutions. Yeah.
So you were talking about like privatizing these institutions,
Yeah,
and
these
then Anthony
libraries.
was like, "All right, well,
It sounds good in theory.
Does that mean black owned?" And
Yeah, of course.
I think the agreement here, because I'm like, look, if the black community wanted to own it, right, like somebody
go
in
in
the
and get it.
community, and then they withdrew and I mean willfully. I don't mean like, hey, you guys don't get to pay. I mean like. The black community rise up and say, you know what, we're going to do our own thing because, like you said, it's not getting done. It's not meeting the needs in this particular community. And let's face it, the black community in different cities probably going to have slightly different needs for whatever reason, right?
Absolutely.
I assume.
Yeah,
And,
because like Highlands, like how they have, libraries in Highlands over there on the south side over there, they have different books for certain needs that's in the surrounding area. Not really because it's all subsidized publicly, but that's how, if it was black owned and someone decided to go ahead and, all right, let's go and have it over here in the Highlands area where we're going to prioritize, let's see, I don't know, health, wellness, studying medical, things of that nature, chemistry, whatever. Downtown will focus more on construction, sciences, hard hat stuff. And then in the varying sections of Jacksonville, you're going to have different needs. Now, someone would start this up because one thing that black people do, we like to read. We got books.
Do we?
Yeah. Or at least we like to buy a lot of books that can sit on the shelf as decoration. And
It depends on the age group.
Yeah.
A lot of folks, man, who are my age and younger, they ain't reading no books like
I'm not
that.
saying.
I'm keeping it 1,000.
I'm not saying it's really useful information.
I'm welcome to comments.
But there's a lot of books. Cause you see a lot of books in the what is that?
And if they are reading Zane, they reading a whole bunch of stuff, man. That
it's Twilight now.
Oh, it's Twilight.
Either Twilight.
Twilight is more seductive than Zane is.
Or they still got Soldier Sister in there, Sister Soldier. She's still there. Now she's still there now.
What is Twilight though?
Oh, Twilight is a fantasy novel dealing with vampires and things of that nature.
I thought that was mostly like white.
Nah,
kid
it's
stuff.
not. Nah,
Not
a
white kid stuff?
lot of sisters, a lot of them on there. If
Okay,
it's not 50 Shades of Foolishness, it's gonna be Twilight. Yeah.
All right.
Well, here's my point. You're still not reading anything political. You're still not reading anything, man, that's based on how can I get this money.
But I'm saying it's gonna be there. Not saying it's gonna be everything that you may want it to be, but the library will have that there.
I ain't talking about that. I'm all for you getting your variety. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when you say, I'm not a, let me take that back.
Mm-hmm.
There are people my age that read.
Absolutely, yeah.
But they don't read a lot, and they don't read enough for us to really have real discourse about what we're talking about, like for these topics that we're talking about
Yeah,
right
and
now.
these books should be provided for because we have a lot of books in these stationary little
But you
bookshelves.
can get Zane and Twilight.
Oh, yeah,
that ain't
yeah.
That's not readily available, and you find a way to get them books.
Oh, yeah.
This is what we got to stop doing. I hate when black folks say we're not a monolith and we're not together. I get the fact that we have two opposing ideas, but the groups that are around us, for whatever is in their best interest, they are on the same page about. Mm-hmm. Internally, they may have some differences, but when we talk about United States of America, we talk about friends, and I'm talking about pan-European, and I'm talking about that. When it pertains to going into Africa, when it pertains to keeping sanctions on Haiti, when it pertains to doing what's in the best interest, particularly economically, they are on the same page. What I'm telling black folks is you don't necessarily have to agree all the time. And I know you have different ideas, but you're not in a position where you can sit up here and be philosophical about what we should or shouldn't do. You know, you need 5 pillars in a community. You know, you need food, clothing, shelter, medical care, and a economic center, which is a credit union and or a bank to finance things around that community. That's not up for discussion. Every real viable community has that. That don't have nothing to do with not being a monolith. That's just an excuse for you not being able to work with folks so you can improve the conditions of the community. In terms of the government, I am completely opposite of you guys. The government made intervention for everybody. They made an intervention for the Italians. They had the Bank of Italy. It's now the Bank of America. They made intervention for rich folks, man, like what's the Commodore Vanderbilt? He was a slave owner and he was into the railroads. They gave him free land. So when just using those two as an example, when it comes to black folks getting something for the federal government, it's no different than everybody else who's got something for the federal government, including the founding fathers.
Here's the thing about me. I'm not really a fan of the whataboutism as far as what other groups do in comparison to what everybody else does, because just because they would get the benefits of this, that, and the third from the government doesn't mean that it's a benefit to that group, even though it may seem like it during that time.
If it didn't have generational wealth, you may have an argument. But because of what I'm talking about, give these groups an opportunity or gave them generational wealth and a leg up, I disagree. Now, like I've said off the air, if you agree with that wholeheartedly, tell them to give the stuff back. Tell rich, white, affluent white folks to get the stuff back. Tell the Native Americans that they can't have annual money that's coming in. Tell the Jews that they can't have $50 billion from the German government, in addition to the $24 million that we've given them here recently. If that's the case and you agree with that, and I don't have a problem with that,
right.
Give it back and let's start from scratch and let's find out.
So I got a question here then. Are you content with how the federal government has, if you will, given education to the black community?
I'm not content with anything that the government has done as it pertains to black folks historically, because they haven't had the black community's best interest at
But
mind.
they have continuously, like we see calls for more money, and more money has been given to education and whatnot, supposedly to improve education, just in general. We're not even talking about like black history. We're just talking about like your standard education, like math, reading, writing, those kind of things, right? And so from when I look at this, I look and I say, well, the federal government or the state governments for that matter, they put in a whole lot of money and it's, for this education. The government has done this, and the black community, in my opinion, has been robbed of an education, even just a foundational one. We don't have to go down the road of black history, just your regular, like, I can read books, I can do, significant math, I can, I can write, I can do some of these fundamental
Yeah, that's happening
things
today. Yeah.
And so it seems weird to say, well, I want, like the government gave to all these people. The government seems to have given in one particular area,
but that's
some
not
things,
black specific.
But then in other areas where they have quote unquote given,
but that's not
the
black,
results have been garbage.
But that's not black specific. When you talk about education under an umbrella, and even if they were trying to target neglected communities, it never really gets to the people that it's targeted for. I'm talking about specific legislation and or policy given to a group of people and that specific demographic of people. Whether we want to put it up under the educational umbrella, that's fine. But I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking about I get something just because of who I am. And so I feel like if the government was intentional about doing that for black folks and we still had an issue, I would agree with you on that. But when you talk about educational initiatives and you talking about money that's allocated for education, that's not going to black folks. That's going to an education umbrella, and you have bloodsuckers that are taking the money, and it's not filtering down to those places that, in theory, you would think it would have helped.
But here's the
So should we extricate ourselves, or just in general, extricate the black community, and just because we're talking about the black community, not like only the black community, but extricate the black community from the government to some degree, because clearly, as we seem to be agreeing, the government isn't getting the job done.
They're pretty trash
in many more areas. I mean, I get what you're saying
in that department.
In other areas, like, hey, the Japanese and these other groups, they receive some sort of benefit at some point.
They see a lot of benefits.
But
Keep going.
the government as a whole has been doing things. And I feel like what I'm observing is that the black community just it's getting worse and worse in terms of its standing in society, right? Like they're having more and more struggle.
See, this goes back to, there are two things at play here. One, black folks are voting blue no matter who, and they're not getting anything out of supporting this party. And so the way that we are lobbying, and I'm going to say we, but the way that we are lobbying and advocating for things, we're not advocating things that have our best interests at heart. The Democratic Party is a alternative, gay, begging, keep you dependent party that is really going to take care of every people of color and demographic first before they do anything for black folks, because they don't have to. And because black folks refuse to pull out of the political system and vote in a block, you don't have to vote for a political party just because they do 5 things. You can vote for one. People vote for something for single issues.
Sure.
And I think black folks are too philosophical. I think they're too smart for their own good. And I think they need to pull out of the Democratic Party as a whole and sit back and say, let me listen to the libertarians. They may not agree with reparations, but it can't be no worse than what's going on. Let me listen to every now and then what this Republican is talking about. They can't be no worse than what the Democrats are talking about. But we're going to hold our vote, and just like any other woman wants to be courted, you're going to have to take me out. You're not going to be screwing me in the park like black folks are getting screwed in the park, man, metaphorically, in this relationship. Sure. It's a dysfunctional relationship, and because they're still in this relationship is one of the reasons why they're not getting anything from the government at all levels of the government.
And I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but my contention comes from the fact that our value politically is not what's going to give us the results. I think we have way too much political capital in the way of, not in the way that we're thinking about it, but in the way that we give way too much leeway for the government to come and institute these welfare, institutions so they can expand their government power. But they're doing it on the backs of us, on the backs of African Americans, because they relate it to black struggle, black this and black history and all that stuff.
You got to get off my back.
I'm just saying, we need to do this and do all that, and like it's a pull yourself by your own bootstraps, blah, blah, blah. They keep selling the narrative for every generation, the fact that we can't do anything for ourselves. So I believe that our value should come from what it is culturally that we're not doing. And I believe that is going to be the impetus for what we can then later on.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
The protesting, initially we talked about the protesting about
Yeah,
the issues from the educational standpoint.
Of course. Yeah. Cause like
Do you think right now,
yes.
in terms of education, do you think black folks should not be protesting at all?
No. I don't believe they should protest at all. I think it's a waste of time. You protest with your money, you protest with your feet, you protest in many other ways, but we've been conditioned by watching every PBS special.
I don't have no problem with that.
Yeah, but every PBS special about the civil rights movement, that's the way to do things. But I believe
they didn't watch the whole thing because they didn't see the boycott.
No, but I'm telling you, and you're absolutely right. The thing, I'm mentioning that because they keep telling you that this is how you beg to the government to get something done, and they keep saturating that message.
Does it come across as begging?
Absolutely. It does come across as begging. So it became a learned behavior through generations. This is what we need to do to get things done. No, not at all. It's just straight
we don't have no leverage to negotiate. At least that's what I'm saying. Well, I take that back because if we're going to talk about the vote,
but that's what I'm saying. We shouldn't be negotiating to them for leverage. They should be coming to us for that. Well, it should be the opposite because we try to do, you know what I mean?
Well, here's what I'm saying. Because black folks vote blue no matter who.
Right.
They're never in that position. And you're never taken seriously as a block or a consent. People say black folks are not a monolith. They are when it comes to voting. The majority of black folks either don't vote or they vote blue. They are a monolith. And what I'm saying is if you are going to practice political
the result is monolith, maybe not the ideas.
Right.
What I'm saying though is you need to pull back. You need to get more balls. You need to be clearly identifiable and stop being blurred in with all of these folks jumping on your back and using black folks as a way to push your movement and push your agenda and say that when I get what I want to be clear. I agree with you. I think we do beg a lot. And I think we are politically unsophisticated when it comes to our politics.
I think not politically unsophisticated. We're culturally unsophisticated.
Well, this is what I'm going to say, and then I'm going to give it to you.
Yes, sir.
Take the resources. Use the resources to uplift your community, because the reason why I'm a fan of the resources is twofold. One, as a taxpayer, and I know you guys are not necessarily into that, there are things that you're supposed to have as a foundation, as a basics for your community. You're not getting that, in my opinion.
Of course not.
And two, when you do get it, you need to reenact some codes of ethics in your community that's going to create some stability and some stuff moving forward, so you no longer have to do that. Right. The problem that I have, and the reason why I feel like the government's on the hook, is because the government is complicit in some of these more than 60 black Wall Streets you let get burned to the ground, including Rosewood that's right down the street. So to let them off the hook and say you need to continue to do that when you were complicit, allowing for these people to get deputized, that they came in and murdered men, women, and children. No, the government, you're on the hook for that.
This is where we defer. Instead of saying that you are obligated to help us because of this evil that you have done, I'm saying you need to leave us the hell alone because of the evil that you have done.
After justice is served.
I don't believe that they're even capable of doing that. That's where I'm coming from.
They were capable with other groups.
Imagine the Chinese begging the Mongols
for maybe
restitution for things that they've done.
Maybe the word isn't capable. Maybe the word the operating word here is, were they willing? And I don't know that the government is willing, right? And at that point you say, well, the government isn't willing, so you can do one of two things. You can keep fighting for the government to do something that it is shown time and time again that it's unwilling to do, whether it could do it or not. Or from the more libertarian perspective, and we don't say this just to black people, but this, that's what we're talking about. Remove yourself from the government and be more independent. So from the libertarian perspective, if you said, look, we're going to create our own homeschool system here in Jacksonville. It's black owned. We're going to teach black history as we believe it. We don't care whether DL or anybody else agrees with it. We're teaching it. And we're going to raise up our kids to be, lawyers and doctors and plumbers and just, all manner of different, education and jobs and whatnot. And we're going to run our own banks and, and just start having our own stuff. You wouldn't hear a peep of argument from the Libertarian Party, but you would from the Democrat Party for sure. And I'm not really sure how the Republican Party would work because they don't really depend on.
Well,
that.
I think
we
yeah.
did that. I mean, from 1865 to 1930, 1940, again, you had more than 60 black.
Right.
I would make the argument, outside of all the immigrants that's coming in and everybody else that's already here, we are the ones that build and did the most from nothing.
That's
and
cool.
build these
That's
communities
good.
the whole
So
night.
we can do it again without their help. They did it without their help
here's
before.
Here's where I agree
it can
with
be done
you.
again.
I'm a fan of pulling back from the system and building your own. I am. There is another option. You can take up arms and you do like everybody else, and you can create another government that you feel like is more humane, or you can leave. There are other options that black folks have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Leave where? Go where?
You could. Ghana said that they're going to open up the country for the year of the return, and other African countries have said that too.
Oh, okay.
In addition to what's going on with Niger and Fossey and all those other countries over there, man, in that central West Africa part of the country, or continent rather, they've kicked out the French, the whole nine. Now, I'm not saying black folks get up and just leave per se, but
Yeah, because it can be done
we act
on
as
soil.
if we
Yeah.
act as if we don't have any options, and we
Right.
do have some options. The first option is to get off that blue plantation, pull back, and make your vote more viable for people, man, to try to court, as opposed to just saying you're going to vote blue no matter who. That's the first thing you need to do. And once you do that, you have to be consistent and intentional about you want out of the vote. Right now, black folks are not even doing that right. Before we even get to the issue about the government, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean getting to the issue about the government? As far as them coming in and having to help, bring justice to what they've done in the past,
Well,
or
as far as a collaborative ask.
I see. Right.
Even what I'm saying is, once you get them to the table, because now your vote means something. The ask is not, I'm going to be begging you moving forward. The ask is, you need to be held accountable. You need to give me what I need to have in this race-based capitalist society so I can thrive. I no longer need you anymore. I agree with what you guys are saying in terms of government. I disagree in the fact that you do have to own up to what you do. You don't just go out here and just kill folks and then say, we're just going to chop it up to moving forward. No, you don't get an opportunity to do that. What I'm saying is, I'm holding you responsible because you are the one that's primarily responsible because you allowed for these things to take place in the country. Once justice is served, I no longer need to be begging you for anything. We've already proved that we can do stuff on our own if you don't come in here and if you don't try to kill and or take away what we build up.
So let me ask you then, and this is where my, your knowledge of history will be very valuable. Black Wall Street, Oklahoma?
That's
Tulsa,
one of them.
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
That's one of them.
Got burned down basically. It was
And the judges said they're not going to give those survivors any money. But keep going.
It was thriving, right? Was it wealthy?
There was wealth there, yes.
Okay, so let me ask you, was justice served before that wealth was built?
In what way do you mean?
So it was wealthy at one point, and there was a lot of economic activity. There was a lot of success within the black community. Prior to all of that happening, was justice served from anything that happened prior to that?
Yes, because the Native Americans that owned a lot of the black folks in that area they were homesteaded. So Black Wall Street is a direct result of land that was given so those black folks, man, could be prosperous. And then some of the economic folks who specialize in building businesses then came to Tulsa to build it up. So there's a lot of things at play for Tulsa specifically. But one of the things, man, that gave them a leg up was the fact that they got free land that was owned based on the fact that a lot of the folks in that area were descendants of folks who were owned by Native Americans.
Right. Okay. So from a libertarian perspective, we're, the conversation about giving land back, if it's currently in private hands, that's going to be a tough argument that we're going to have trouble settling, right? Like between you and I. However,
the white folks that came here, they just took the land. They didn't have a problem with it.
However, as we were talking before the show, there is an awful lot of federal land.
Okay.
That I would be more than happy to be like, you know what? justice? You want to serve that kind of justice?
Yeah, the U.S. government's owned about over 60%
and
of
I'm like,
land in the U.S.
does the federal government need to own all that property? No. Do they need to own any?
No.
The answer is no. So who do you want to give it to? Well, if you have a group of people that say, hey, justice was never served, or in some way it was, but then it kind of got reneged, like in the case of Black Wall Street, like you got a little bit of justice, but then people came in, burned the place down, and then left us in shambles, and that was that, right? Like, so what in whatever way we're talking, like whether it was never served or partially served or served and then reneged or whatever the case may be, government land that we have right now, federal land, give it up, or state land if the states have it too.
I want to say this, where there's intimate domains or whatever. Tulsa is one of many Black Wall Streets that was burned down. And the reason I say that is because I think folks want to try to make that a one-off. But right here in Florida, you have two such areas, Wachobee and also Rosewood, that were thriving Black communities that were burnt down too. East St. Louis, I can go on and on and on. It was a systemic issue. It wasn't a one-off in terms of.
I'm not saying it was.
But I'm just saying the government, again, is complicit because, and specifically in the case of Tulsa, a lot of the residents there were deputized. The National Guard was involved. The local police department was involved. The government was well aware of it. So I don't know about anybody else, but if I go out and I commit a crime and it's found out that I was a part of that crime, even 30 years down the road, they're going to put me in jail.
Depends on the crime. There are statutes of limitations on crimes.
Divine intervention and just natures of law says somebody has to be on the hook for these particular crimes. If the Jews are out here talking about all the time Bernstein Bears, if the Jews are out here always talking about how they have been victimized, et cetera, well, I would point to the fact that you got $50 billion. You got a country of your own, even though that wasn't necessarily your original land. And this country gave you $24 million in 2 administrations, and you're not even citizens. There are too many examples that I can bring up in which all of these other groups that claim they're so self-sufficient and so prosperous have been given multiple opportunities and been given a lot of money from the federal government. What I'm saying, though, is I don't disagree with you guys in terms of government's intervention. I have a problem because it's not consistent.
Sure. No, I get
There's
that.
no consistency between what other groups are getting and what Black folks are advocating for.
See, the thing about me, I'm not envious at all about what other groups have gotten, what they haven't gotten, because I don't think, for me, I can reconcile asking for anything from an institution that doesn't have my interest at heart from the very beginning. Because I believe that if we spend too much time on that, we're going to miss and not recognize the power that we have today. And it's because of that we end up keeping ourselves from growing and prospering with the resources that we have right now in front of us as a whole.
I'm not saying doing that exclusively. I'm saying right now we can build up our communities. I already said that I'm a fan of having our own educational system. When the funding comes down, you have to have an infrastructure that's built. We should be doing that now. And so when these folks get this, to not have that in place or not have that thought process in place, it ain't gonna do you no good anyway. So I'm advocating walking and chewing gum at the same time. Come up off this plantation, which is the Democratic Party, get what you can get, pull together your resources now. So if and when that does come, you'll have a nice foundation and an infrastructure to be able to practice moving forward in.
And with the walking and chewing gum, I definitely agree with you on that. Just go ahead and have this thing moving forward and actually patronize the people that we have right now locally in Jacksonville, Florida, who are doing way too many good things for the people in Jacksonville. I've been to 2 of these Edward Water University's events that's been happening. One, the Whole Women's Expo. Another one we just came from last week. I forget what the name of that was, but it was
You talking about with Jada's event?
Yeah, Miss Jada's event. We're gonna have those interviews put up on our page pretty soon.
I'm working on it. Sorry, guys.
That's all. It's all good.
There's a lot of video editing.
Jada Hunter, quick shout out.
Got stuff going on.
Over at Emmett Reed. Glad to see Emmett Reed is up and going. Thought y'all was going to drag your feet on that, but I'm glad that Emmett Reed Community Center, quick shout out right over there on Payne Street.
So
Exactly.
I think we're coming up on our time. So it sounds like the agreement that we're all under, and remember, 2 black folk, 1 token, two libertarians. One
Bernstein Bears. He's not. He's not a Bernstein Bear.
So we got some we got some differences. Like not only from where we come from, but also just political and views and whatnot. But it seems like what we're agreeing upon is that here in Jacksonville, the best path forward to resolve education issues would be for the black community to say, look, we got some churches here. Let's set up shop. Let's educate our community the way we feel that it should be, which I'm totally agree with. In fact, white people have been doing that. They have homeschool associations, right? Now, they don't do it like where white people were making there are some really small enclaves that do that. But for the most part, it just happens to be predominantly white, at least the ones that I've seen, right? They're not like, we're going to teach white history. But they are saying like there's a lot of religious instruction that they're like, we're not getting the religious instruction that we want.
So you decided, hey, look, we're going to take matters in our own hand and we're going to be responsible.
And they will teach their kids all the fundamentals, writing and math and reading and all that good stuff. But they'll also have like, some sort of course that, I think they do that teaches additionally like biblical stuff, I think.
Right.
Stuff that you're not going to get in the public schools.
Mm-hmm. So real quick, my mom has been an educator for 40 years. Quick shout out, Mom. But one of the issues that she had when she was teaching at Martin Luther King, I'm putting you out there, versus Loretta, was the support from the parents. The support, even though it was a predominantly white school at Loretta Elementary, whatever she wanted, she could get. The parents were very much involved in education, and it was something that was very much serious. When she was at Martin Luther King, it was the complete opposite. So this is a call to action for the black community. I am very honest, and I'm keeping it 1,000 wow. When it pertains to something that is entertainment related, something silly, something athletic related, we do a great job of that. And if you want to be taken seriously about how serious you are about your education, I need to see you do it at home and moving forward at secondary ed, moving forward. So to just go ahead and put a cherry on top of it, black folks need to worry less about trying to protest about something and more about trying to pull together their resources.
And with that being said, before we wrap up, I want to pose a question to everybody here. I'm a very big advocate of taking away resources from those or institutions that keep us in the bottom totem pole of us trying to move forward and move the needle to a place where we can accomplish what we want to accomplish. With that being said, property taxes are one of the big things that's driving public school education, right? Yeah. That's driving this stuff. So even though we may set up these institutions for focused learning outside of the public institutions and make it private, we're still subsidizing public school institutions. That goes against our better interest. Instead of going down there to Tallahassee to protest about whatever the government's doing with education that they're not obligated to correctly teach, I believe for myself, what would be a better protest, we go down there and protest them lifting up these property taxes, or at least lessening them, or cutting out or going back to the millage rate that was before, so that we can actually have much more change in our pocket to make that happen. How do you feel about that?
I don't have no problem with it. I don't have a problem with it at all.
Because in case anybody knows, because there's a lot of things that we're talking about the African American community is not really privy to, because there's not really much news and outlets that are available to them.
Don't let them off the hook. No. You can go down to City Hall. You can pull up that's how I know they ain't reading. You can pull up an article. You can go online. You can do this and the third, the whole nine. You find out when Beyonce coming. You find out when the game is going on.
They sure do, because
no.
Charlie Wilson.
We're not gonna do that. Charlie Wilson.
When that jazz festival, boy.
No. I love you.
They was packed.
I wouldn't tell you if I didn't love you. But right now you're gonna have to tighten up. Get off that plantation. Get out of that house. Go down there, man, and practice civic engagement. Find out what's going on in your city, how these investors are coming up, buying up all this property. We were on 60 Minutes, man, about 6 months ago. So it's serious business out here. It's serious business. If you're serious about your education, we need to see that manifested, man, at the most smallest level in your home, at the elementary level, moving forward. No, it ain't no excuse for not knowing. You find out about everything else. So no, I can't let you off the hook for that.
Awesome. That's good.
Right. Who closing us out?
Go ahead, Trace.
Okay, well, we're going to close it out. This is Political Bombcast. I'm Ron Tracy Robinson, the pragmatist. We have Anthony Brown, the people's champ.
The agitator / the people's champion.
Absolutely. The activist. The active activist. Right? And we have D.O. Cummings, the chairman of Libertarian Party, and he is the token, but the wonderful token.
I got like one name. He got like 7.
Come on back.
I know, right? He got so many title belts under his name.
Terrence Crawford, like.
Absolutely.
Till next time.
Peace.